Hi, so episode 5, Men Against Fire or War is Hell. Before I go into it, I want to wish everyone a better 2017 than 2016, because I'd like to say it can't get worse, but I'm a realist and we didn't expect that to be what it was, so... But I'll remain hopeful, for all of you, at least. And of course, a big thank you to everyone for getting behind this. I know it's been one of my better performing video series, so I'm very happy with that. It does mean that technically I've obligated myself to do the other two seasons, so I'll probably do those in reverse order as well. So I'll do season 2, then season 1. Why not? And before I go into the analysis properly, I do want to say it's very nice to see someone who I know and respect again. Same with Bryce Dallas Howard in Nosedive. Obviously, we saw Sarah Snook in this. I did a review of Predestination, which I thought was great, and she did a great job. So I'm very happy to see her in this. Sort of two things that I like coming together. But it also kind of incorporates another thing that I really liked, which was Starship Troopers. When they were talking about the roaches and hunting them, I immediately got that idea, like the bug hunt, and I suppose you could argue that's aliens as well, but Starship Troopers was what really came to my mind at first, that these supposed beasts are terrorising Earth citizens, and people need to defend Earth from them. But that's not the case, because this is Black Mirror. This is not Robert Heinlein. This is Black Mirror. And it's often not exactly what you think. And that's one of the reasons we love it, of course. But we do get hints that the roaches are at least not simple beasts. I don't think it's really until Stripe Systems pretty much completely failed and he sees the humans, even though his teammate doesn't see them as human. He sees them that way. That's the point that we really get it cemented. But until then, there's maybe they're not. If not, they're human. It's maybe they're not just beasts. It's something in between. Maybe like Fallout's ghouls. Some may be feral, and just the only kind thing to do really is to exterminate them because it's no kind of life. But there are some who can, operate machinery and weapons like the rifle that we see and things like that. So that was my first inclination. And I really got that from when they're talking to the settlement and they're saying they've taken electronics. Now, there are animals on Earth who are sensitive to various parts of the electromagnetic spectrum aside from light. But if they're attracted to whatever's radiating this out, normally they damage it because they're trying to get too close, or maybe it's making them angry, so they just break it. They don't steal the parts because they don't know what to do with them. So that made me think maybe they're not just mindless beasts. They are referred to in a similar way to people. It's who, not what, that is used. Which is quite interesting because given who says that, which is like the squad leader, maybe they know. We obviously know that the higher ups know, like the Chancellor at the end of the episode obviously lays it all out to Stripe, but maybe even squad leaders know. Maybe it's part of the important thing that they know about this. She even uses the phrase strong and pure later on to refer to humans versus roaches. And I will get onto that because that talks about some very dark subject matter, so be prepared. Which is also an area that I've been very interested in, but we'll get to that. But it is interesting, this kind of idea that these supposed beasts throughout are shown to have abilities beyond simple mindless beasts. And one of the interesting things is obviously they've rigged this device, which made me think of Matt Smith's sonic screwdriver, to obviously mess with Stripe's mass system. And I think that's a good topic to actually move on to. We've sort of talked that, there's the hints that the roaches may be not just animals, but the mass system is really what ties it all together, because without that, this would be very different. Now, it is heavily implied, I'd almost argue perhaps even stated outright, towards the end again when Stripe's been given the ins and outs of what it is and what it's for and how it basically means that they can fight. Where obviously he signs up to have it implanted when he's signing up for military service. So I do think that it is a specifically military tool. Now, whether that gets taken out if you leave, you finish your tour of duty or whatever, that's unclear. But I will just say that only people serving in the military have the mass system, because that's what it's for. It changes the appearance of your enemies, because as the Councillor says at the end, people don't want to kill people. We've tried for centuries to get people to do it, and a lot of the time you see someone dying in front of you and you can't deal with it. The threat of being shot for cowardice wasn't enough. The intensive training to try and dehumanise you wasn't enough. So the obvious logical next step, dehumanise the enemy. And once technology allows you to do that, everything's simple. Because the mass system isn't just, a Snapchat filter that just changes the appearance. We find that it affects at least the sense of smell. And the hearing, because they don't hear words. They hear these guttural snarls. That's all they get. They don't smell the excrement and the blood and the sweat and all the horrible stench of war. They just see beasts chattering with no discernible thing to use to say that these are human. And that's what scares me with this episode, because it was inspired by things like the fact that we can now destroy a village on the other side of the world with remote technology. We can have drones that just annihilate places with ease. That's terrifying. There's no other word for it. That's terrifying. And that is what's inspired this. Obviously, we see them use like the sort of normal style drones, obviously to get an aerial view fed into the mass system. But it is this whole idea that the military's now turned into like Call of Duty. And nowhere is that more apparent in the fact that, they're removing the human element. Because part of what makes it easy in games, whether it is Call of Duty or, I've used it before, Fallout, you will kill raiders there, but they're not real human. You don't smell and etc. You don't smell the blood and everything like that. You just are shooting pixels. And that's a lot easier. You do get people who are, crazy people who will happily kill others, but they're not ridiculously common, but it makes it easier. And this is what they're turning the military into in this episode. Perhaps in real life, but that's the subject for another time. And that's, as I say, the scariest element. They're turning it into a game, and you get characters like Ray who, she's crazy. She's like, if she was now, she'd be like, MLG, pro gamer, chucking back Mountain Dew and scoffing Doritos. Stereotypes abound. But, she does have that ridiculous addiction to combat. Like her KDA is all that matters to her. Kill, death, assist, in case you didn't know. That's what matters to her. Like when, they're doing the targeting and things like that, when he first notices his mass system glitching out. It is a competition, it is a game. She's wanting to rank up, you know what I mean? And it's really kind of unsettling because it's believable. And that's when, I've said it before, that's when Black Mirror is at its best. When it's believable. When you could kind of go, yeah, this could happen. That's when it's terrifying. That's when it becomes the dark reflection on us. So I did mention before that the mass system is military only. Like I said, just, the whole kind of FPSifying the military. But that does lead into a rather scary idea. Now, your average civilian, assuming that, either it's deactivated once you're out the services and not given to civilians based on, obviously, Stripe's interview footage that we see later on, then civilians are being conditioned And that's scarier because, again, that happens. Go back to the 60s and the civil rights movement. Just because, there's a different colour of skin. Look now, and I'm not going to try and butcher any names because I don't know the right ones, but any, sort of Muslim females in full covering are suspicious. Gender, and the biggest one, that's been going on for a long time is the poor. The poor are less than human. It's easy to wage war on them because they don't have the resources to fight back, like roaches. Now, with roaches, it isn't just a case of poverty, and this does lead into my next point. For a long while, I've been kind of fascinated and horrified by the idea of eugenics, which is effectively the process of breeding the perfect whatever. We've done it with animals and crops for centuries, which is why we have, corn that looks actually decent sized rather than like the thin, scrawny looking things that originally existed. Why we have cows that are huge rather than their normal size and shape. Why we have certain breeds of dogs that are very specifically idealised for a particular role. Eugenics is a thing that we've been doing for a long while, but where people have a problem is when it comes to humans. And this is where this episode really takes, the sort of dark turn. Because, again, going back to the earlier line, strong and pure, when compared to roaches. Now, we find that, it's just their DNA is tested. You have a high chance of carrying a disease, or even a low chance, You should not be allowed to breed, you should be exterminated. That's eugenics in action. That's breeding out diseases. That's making humans strong and pure. And it's terrifying. I mean, phrases like strong and pure have existed for a long while in groups that we don't particularly like to talk about. And the fact that the society of the future on a global level, because those soldiers are not like Scandinavian of some description, but the villagers are. So it's clearly a global scenario. And the whole world is saying that if you've got any chance of having any kind of disease, you are less than human. And you must be exterminated to keep the bloodline pure. It's horrific. It's abhorrent, I think is the best word for it. Like I say, eugenics has fascinated me for a long while because I can see why people would go to it. Like in the episode, they just want humanity to be as strong and pure as it can be. Eradicating disease surely isn't a bad thing. And no, eradicating disease isn't a bad thing, but stopping people from breeding just because they might have a disease is it's very muddy waters, and it's a very terrifying area of science. And obviously, when these stats are given, this explanation of what it's all about is given to Stripe, it really cements it. This whole idea of ensuring combat compliance because it's the only way that they can make humans the best they can be is really, really terrifying. I do find it interesting though as well because obviously he shows the consent interview. They're kind of moving the blame to the soldier. It's like he even says it.
You agreed to have your mass implant put in. Set up. Every soldier does. You can't just embed it and feed you a dream. Your mind would reject it. You have to accept it. Willingly.
It shows the fact that he's killed a human. He consents to this implant, which is why I think, that's the bit that made me think, yes, this is definitely just military only. You're consenting to that being put in to make you a better soldier, both through tactical and intelligence kind of stuff, which is great. I have no problem with that side of it. It's when they're sort of making it, you're not actually killing humans, even though you are. But like I say, they're moving that blame. They are shifting it across. And he's given a very interesting ultimatum of, you know, live with the knowledge of what you've done. And, you know, have those implants removed. Live with that knowledge. Or put them back in and forget everything. You know, it's a red pill, blue pill scenario. It's the Matrix, you know. But it's very interesting in the end, because is he aware of what he's done? Because, you know, he's there and, you know, you see the flickering in the eyes that obviously denotes that the mass system is actually in effect and operational. And, you know, he's seeing the fantasy girl from his dreams, you know, waiting for him in the house, but there are tears down his face. And it's not clear, are these tears of joy because he's like, oh, as far as he's aware, you know, I've served my time in the military and I get to spend the rest of my life with this woman, or does he know? And he's like, it is better to live out in the middle of nowhere in this kind of dream than willingly go and kill other people. You know, is that what they mean by the discharge and like the sort of... It's implied that it would be more kind of like incarceration, you know, in the way that we think of it, but it's actually perhaps this is his incarceration. This is his punishment. He has to live in the middle of nowhere in a fantasy world. And is there food there? Will he die within a few days? You know, is there water? And those tears really are, I think, quite important to the whole episode, because we don't know if this is tears of joy that he's gotten away from it, tears of sadness that he can't do it anymore, or whatever else. And like I say, this episode is loaded with a lot of difficult subject matter. You know, the fact that we're turning our military into a game as much as possible, removing the human element if we can, so it makes it easy to kill. And the fact that, you know, there are people in the world, and there have been for centuries, who believe that because they have a particular colour skin, because they have a particular background, because they believe a certain thing, that they are better and everyone else is inferior and should be bred out of existence. Like I say, eradicating disease, not a problem. Making people sterile or forbidding them from breeding just because they might pass on a disease is horrific. So I'd like this, you know, to have ended on a happy note, but this isn't an episode with happy notes, unfortunately. So it's food for thought, and I think that's good television. If it makes you think and gives you ideas to take away, it's done a good job in my eyes. So until next week, when we close out this season of Black Mirror, as always, take care.